I saw this clip the other day on Saturday in which Kyrie Irving and Jason Tatum were joking around together. They were horsing around, all in good fun. They seem to be enjoying their company, and they do have history. They were once teammates back when Kyrie had that stint with the Celtics. He was on that team for a brief minute or two. And at first, I didn't think much about that interaction. And then for some reason, I started thinking about Kyrie's time in Boston and what could he have done if he had stayed with the Celtics. And then I started thinking deeply of all the great teams that Kyrie played with, but couldn't win a championship with despite having the talent around him. I thought about just the Celtics with Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. Granted, they were young and they still needed to get the experience, but thinking about how if Kyrie stayed there, he probably could have won another title with them eventually. And then I was just thinking about how he just forced his way out of Boston to go to the Nets because he wanted to play with Kevin Durant. And then also they created a super team for like a brief minute, one of the shortest super teams in NBA history when it comes to stints, by getting James Harden. And it looked promising in Brooklyn for a brief period of time that this team was capable of at least winning one title. They came very close, I felt, back in 2021 against that series with the Bucks. That they were right on the verge. If Kyrie didn't get injured, I think they would have won that series. And if Kevin Durant didn't step on that 3-point line, things would have been different for sure. I think Kyrie might have been able to come back during the playoffs had they won that series, but I think everybody believed that despite losing that series, that the Nets would be back next year for another title run, and they had a high chance of getting it if this could remain healthy. But obviously, that fell apart due to Kyrie's craziness, the stuff he said off the court, politically. I won't get into that stuff simply because YouTube is very sensitive about it. But you know the deal, what he said off the court, just all that political stuff that got a backlash against him, and just the craziness that ensued afterwards in regards to that situation, and that resulted in him getting kicked off the Nets, which was interesting. He also destroyed Harden's time there because Harden and Durant were, good buddies. And then he made Kevin Durant pick either him or Harden. And Durant sided with Kyrie over Harden. And that really offended Harden. And he wanted out and he got traded. So that was the end of that experiment. And Kyrie just pretty much quit on that team and he got sent to the Mavericks. But I was thinking in my mind, like, Kyrie, if he wasn't such a mental basket case, he probably would have had at least one more title by now, either with the Celtics or with the Nets. If he just was mentally right, just then he didn't say the crazy things he did, and he wasn't eccentric. I feel like Kyrie is like the Kanye West of the NBA. Just he's a supremely talented player. He's exciting to watch. I would say one of the most exciting players in the league when you watch him play. He's amazing with his ball handling skills and what he does. I do enjoy watching him play, but I also can acknowledge the mental part that he's not there and not someone I would trust to be part of a championship run. Granted, he did win it with Cleveland, but even in Cleveland, he couldn't be happy there. And I don't blame him for what happened in Cleveland, him leaving. Playing with LeBron is not a picnic. It's not fun. And I get wanting to leave from there, and that's fine. I think even if he stayed with Cleveland after that one title run, that they were not going to win another due to what Kevin Durant did with the Warriors. It just wasn't happening. But I thought what he did with the Celtics was a screw up of epic proportions in the sense that, to me, they were a young, promising team, even though Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown weren't established stars back then. You could see it that they were going to be legit stars, that they were going to be perennial all-stars. And I throw this lightly because I'm not the biggest fan of Jason Tatum because he's a big choker. But I'll say this, that Tatum is, a superstar in this current NBA. So you knew these guys were going to reach those levels of stardom, that it was just a matter of time, them getting experience, going through the trial and error that young players go through when they're developing, that they're going to make mistakes and you just had to hope they grow from it. And that was going to happen. And that just Kyrie just had to live through it, just deal with it. But but eventually that it would come together. And they had already gone on one deep run to the conference final, so you knew that they were going to get there more times. That this was because going to be the first of many because they were young and they hadn't reached their potential yet. So there was just so much room for them to get better. That to me was an ideal team for Kyrie to be on. And Kyrie was still pretty young too. Granted, he was older, but he was, I think, at the start of his prime when he went to Boston. So I felt he had some time. He had several years for them to develop, and he would be able to reach it while still in his prime and take advantage of it. But just he just went crazy and he wanted out and he wanted to go to the Nets. To me, just showing in he's eccentric. Just that he just had to wait out. I know some people could argue with me like, well, if Kyrie didn't leave, then the Celtics wouldn't have gotten Derek White and Porzingis eventually. They were able to make those moves, but I believe they still would have made those moves. They still would have been able to do those moves because Brad Stevens is an amazing GM. They would have just found a way. I just believe that. I am that arrogant when it comes to that stuff. I do think they would have had the same team, but Kyrie on there. Just they could, and he could have won just multiple championships with them. He threw that in the garbage, and then he went to the Nets, and I think he could have gotten at least one title there. I don't know about multiple since they were all getting up in age, but they still were all in their prime at that time. Durant, Harden, and him. Granted, I felt that Durant and Harden were at the tail end of their prime. They were right about the end, but they still had some left in their tank in their prime that it would have been good enough to win one more title. And he threw that away, and he ended up in Dallas. And Dallas, he's had a good run there. He got to the finals once, but now that they were dumb enough to trade Luka Doncic, I don't see him ever getting back to the finals. So that was pretty much done. And I just wonder if Kyrie will have any regrets. Maybe he won't, but when I look back at it, this man threw away just multiple titles due to being a basket case, not being mentally stable. I don't think I've ever seen a player like that in NBA history that threw away just multiple chances to win a title simply because they weren't there mentally. That to me is always just going to be an interesting case study of how if you're not mentally there, then it doesn't matter how talented you are in the NBA, and maybe you can apply this to all of life. It doesn't matter how talented you are. Eventually, you won't have great success or sustain great long-term success. I think Kyrie is the best example of this when I reflect on his career so far.